12 of the Maimer. We were talking in this Maimer about velakachtem biom Harishon, that it speaks all about the idea of the first the first day is the idea of why is it called the first day? It's not the first day. It's the 15th day, and the Medrash brings a whole bunch of inyonim that because of that it's called the Rishon, and there's the level of the Beis Hamikdash and Tshuva and Perei Lechem Rishon, Hashem is Rishon. And so all these things of Rishon, the Maimer explains, has to do with Keser, higher than Seder Ishtalshlus, and that's all Nimshach from the Rishon. Like we know that it's a continuation, Sukkot is a continuation of Yom Kippur, which is the idea of Tshuva, and Tshuva is the idea of Rishon. So therefore it brings about the Rishon, that level that's higher than Seder Ishtalshlus, comes down into Seder Ishtalshlus in such a way that it impacts and transforms it. Like for example with Tshuva, it comes down, the Rishon is from the highest level, from the level of Keser, and together with being from the highest level, the level of Keser, together with that, it also impacts Seder Ishtalshlus and changes Seder Ishtalshlus, that even things that are in the category as doinus, intentional sins, become zachiyas, becomes merits, and so on. So the same idea that Rebbe is going to continue, these levels of Rishon, these levels that are beyond Seder Ishtalshlus, are all things that come down into Seder Ishtalshlus and impact Seder Ishtalshlus, and that's the many different things that the Medrash enumerated of velakachtem biom Harishon, that we are tapping into the Rishon of higher than Seder Ishtalshlus, bring it into all the different levels of Seder Ishtalshlus. So page Tezayin, page 12, line 16, second paragraph on the page. And so to Bishar Hinyonim Shnikroim B'Shem Rishon, and all the other matters that are called a Rishon. Perei Lechem Rishon, I will derive payment for you from the one who is called a Rishon. Ze Esav, it's going on Esav, like the Medrash that we brought earlier says, T'chsiv Hayetze Harishon, the first one to come out into this world was Esav, so he's called the Rishon, so Hashem derives his payment from the Rishon, and he gives it to us, as we're going to explain. And he builds for you the first. The Rishon, this is the Beis Hamikdash, about the Beis Hamikdash is called Hashem's throne of glory. It's exalted from first. In other words, all the way from the highest most levels. And I will bring to you the one who is Rishon. Zem Melech HaMashiach, it's Melech HaMashiach. Shenemar, like it says in the Nevuah, in one of the men in Nevuah, the Sefer Yeshaya about Melech HaMashiach, it says, V'av Rishon Letzion Hine Hinam, that the first for Tzion, which is going on Mashiach, behold, here they are. He shows the Yidden, he shows the Ziknei Yisrael, Shebechulam, in all of these things that Rishon is going on, Esav, Beis Hamikdash, Mashiach, Mudgish Inen HaAchdus Shalamayla Mischalkos is emphasized the idea of unity. It's beyond division. The connection of Velakachtem biom Harishon is to the mitzvah of the Daled Minim. The mitzvah of the Daled Minim, the Maimer spoke about at length, is about the idea of Achdus, not just the Achdus that we always speak about, the Maimer Chazal, about the Achdus between taking four different types of Semeach, representing four different types of Yidden and bringing them together, but also in every one of them. In the Aravas there's Achdus, in the Hadassim there's Achdus, in the Lulav there's Achdus, and in the ultimate level of Achdus is the Esrig. That's why it's the first in the Pasuk, even though the bracha that we make on the Lulav, because the ultimate Achdus, the highest form of Achdus is the Esrig, because the Esrig is not just made of parts, but all the different atmospheres, temperatures, seasons, they all contribute to make one esrig, not different parts of an esrig. So that's why it was velakachtem biom Harishon, the first thing Rishon that's manifest as Pri Eitz Hadar. That's the first thing that's said, even though the bracha is on the lulav. Now we can explain what is the idea of Achdus in these three things of Esav, the Beis Hamikdash, and Mashiach. It says in line 23, the idea that I will derive payment for you from the first. This is Esav. Earlier in the Mimer we said Esav represents his root and source. The root and source of Esav is the world of Tohu, which is first. Why is it first? Because it precedes the world that Neshamas Yisrael, that Yaakov's comes from, which is the level of Tikkun. And that level that's beyond the level of Tohu is connected kosher im avodas hashuva. It's connected with the avodah of tshuva, which tshuva means as well going out of bounds, just like olam hatohu is breaking out of the boundaries of the vessels. But we have to take that world of Tohu and bring it into the vessels of Tikkun. That's the idea that following tshuva, we got to bring it down in our day-to-day life. In a practical sense, Tishrei is such a wild, out-of-the-box type of time. Every day it's increasing and growing till Simchas Torah. It's way beyond everything. But now, at the conclusion of it all, now we have to manifest all of that experience that we had throughout Tishrei and bring it into our day-to-day life. He says, line 26, following the avoid of tshuva, having to do with the rishon, which is Esav. There has to be followed also the organized, orderly fashion of service of the world of Tikkun. The avoida in the world of Tikkun affects the idea that I will derive payment from you from the first. In other words, it's not that Tikkun is disconnected from Tohu, but it's that we're taking Tohu and we're bringing it into Tikkun. We're taking what's connected with Esav and we are taking it. That we transform the negative. That's the idea of tshuva. The transformation of darkness to light and bitter to sweet. That the intentional sins becomes to him like merits. Not just kizachias, like the Rebbe says, but it's not just like merits, but it's actually becoming merits. That's an idea that's beyond division. Like we mentioned before, in the end of the previous paragraph that we finished off during Chalamoid Sukkos, that it says that we are transforming and we are meshing together the two opposites. Top of the next page, page Yud Zayin. Also this idea that I will build for you the one who is the first, which first we said is the Beis Hamikdash. And that is also about the level of coming down into unity. How is that unity? Because in the Beis Hamikdash itself, the velakachtem Rishon that Hashem is promising us is primarily in the third Beis Hamikdash. The Kol Yal Tachlis Hashlemus Beis Hamikdash. It's referring to the ultimate perfection of the Beis Hamikdash. Shezel Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi. When do we have the ultimate perfection of the Beis Hamikdash? That's the third Beis Hamikdash. All of them are concerning the third Beis Hamikdash. It says, Like Avram Shekosu Behar, not like Avram Avinu that says about him, uses the expression of a mountain, like Yitzchak Shekosu Beisodin, not like Yitzchak that says he went out to daven in the field. El Ki Yaakov Shekori Bayis, Yaakov called Hashem's dwelling in this world like a home. That's why he built the level of Bayis. What is that difference? Sheklolos Achiluk Beishnei Akavim L'Shnava Kavim Tzoy. The general difference between the two lines that Avram and Yitzchak represent. Avram represents the line on the right, and Yitzchak represents the line on the left, as opposed to Yaakov, which represents the middle line, the center line, which Akavim, sorry, the center line, Bechinosit shel Yaakov, the level of Yaakov, Umeavriach min hakotza lakotza. It goes through from one end to the other. In other words, it comes from the highest most level and reaches to the lowest most level, just like in the Beis Hamikdash, in the Mishkan. There were like 3 poles that were joining together all the boards of the Mishkan, but the center pole, there was 3 levels of poles, the center pole miraculously bent with the walls and went from one end of the Mishkan to the other end of the Mishkan. That is the idea of the center pole, the center line of Yaakov that comes from the highest most level to the lowest. V'yisedem is even more so. That's an idea of an inheritance without boundaries. That it says about Yaakov Avinu, that Yaakov Avinu's inheritance of the land is not like it says by Avram and Yitzchak exactly the locations. Avram Avinu said, go in the length and the breadth, and Yitzchak was told, I will give you all these lands, but Yaakov was just told, I will spread you out to all the directions, which means that Yaakov Avinu was much more. He was given an inheritance without boundaries. Now, inheritance without boundaries, even more than saying going from one end to another end, because going from one end to another end still indicates that there are ends. Here, it's without end. So he says in the brackets on line 10, it's a higher level than being a pole going from one end to another end. Since there are ends, so in that level, in that regard, he's still called small. The very fact that it's ends, so as big as it is, in comparison to infinite without end, so it's called small. Which of course, like it says in the pasuk, Mi Yaakov Kikatanu, who will raise up Yaakov, that he is small. Why is Yaakov called small? He is called small because of the Mavriach min HaKotzer LaKotzer. On the other hand, when we get to the level of Nachla Bli Mitzarim, then he's not called small anymore. So he says in line 13, this is the same idea of the Beis HaMikdash. That's also the idea of the third Beis HaMikdash in a way of everlasting. The way the everlasting comes down to this physical world. In the spiritual worlds, and Beis HaMikdash is always there waiting in Shemayim to come down. But the idea of the third Beis HaMikdash is that everlasting aspect comes down and manifests down here. Now we're going to speak about another Rishon, so to this word says, I will bring you the first. This is the King Mashiach. That says the first to see, and behold they are. We're saying, behold they are, we're connecting Mashiach being the first, but behold they are with Klal Yisrael. Because Mashiach is the Yechida of all the general Neshamas. It's not a separate thing. There's Mashiach and there's Neshamas Yisrael. He is the Yechida, he's the Atzim all of the Neshamas. Keniska Leil Sif Gimel, like was explained before, the third Ois, which is the same point that we're trying to say. The Rishon comes down into the disparity and makes a unity of it. Like it's brought down in the Chassidus Sefer Moed Naim. Shebechol Echad Mi-Yisrael. Yesh Nitzoytze Shel Mashiach. Every single Yid has within him a spark of Mashiach. Just like in Mashiach, there is the spark of the neshama of every single Yid, and that's why he's the Yechid of the entire Klal Yisrael. And because of that connection, because he has in the spark of every single Yid, therefore he's able to study Torah and teach Torah at every single Yid. And to draw down everything that can be drawn down, and any taps to every single one. And Mashiach could extract every single Yid from Golus because of that connection, that he is the Yechidah, and he has the spark of every Yid, and in him is a spark of Mashiach. So again, we have this thing. It transcends, but it connects. The idea of Yechidah is beyond all levels, the way they're divided. All the other levels of Neshama have divisions in them. Yechidah transcends all of that. Va'afilu k'vi shenasim la'achodim ke'echad. The level of Yechida is beyond even becoming as one. Davar echad mamish, but it's actually totally one. As we always know the difference between echad and yachid. Echad is a one made up of parts. That's why the word echad hints at aleph, ches, and daled, the seven heavens and the earth, and the four sides of the compass, etc. But yachid means a singular, solid state. So Yechida shows that they are beyond la'achodim ke'echad, which is another level in Shamas Yisrael, but it's a lower level. Shezeu inyan ha'yechida the davar echad mamish. K'moi dargas halakus shenikras b'shem yachid. The level of Yechida, which Mashiach is about, is like the level of godliness that's called yachid. L'maylam havaya l'keinu havaya echad. Beyond havaya l'keinu havaya echad, melech yachid chayalamim. The singular king, the life of the world. So just like Hashem has the level of Yochid, so to Yechida is the same idea. Beyond the unity of Havaya Echad, there's where Hashem is called Melech Yochid because it's a singularity and it's a unity. It's beyond any type of division. Oizvav, v'hinein is bar le'elsif dalad, shebe'esrig mudgish inyan ha'achdas begali yoyzrim b'shar shloisha saminim, l'chein nikra b'shem hadar, mena nimshach in hadar b'shar shloisha saminim. The esrig is emphasized the idea of unity, even more revealed than all the other three types. Therefore, esrig is called Priyetz Hadar, and because esrig is called Priyetz Hadar, from that, we both in halacha we learn out hadar, that the lulav has to be a hadar, that dasim have to be a hadar, and the arobas have to be a hadar. But the spiritual idea of hadar, which is that unity, that's much more powerful in the esrig, as we mentioned. That unity that's much more powerful in the esrig impacts that also the other kinds have a unity, though they are not as powerful as the esrig. So therefore, the Rishon has a special connection with the Esrog as well. Line 9, moving from this understood, Shagam Hashayich is Lebiyam Rishon, also the connection with the level called the first day. That we've saying the whole time that the level of Rishon is the unity that's beyond division, is Mudgeshes b'miyuchad b'negela Esrog. It's specifically emphasized concerning the Esrog. So now he's going to bring in a little bit Kabbalah without really explaining. He's going to say the Esrog is this level or that level, but with what he's going to bring in now, he's going to answer a different question that he had before. And that was that on the one hand, it's the first in the pasuk, like we said, we spoke about. On the other hand, there's a svara al pi Kabbalah that the lulav should be on top of the esrog. At least it's definitely at the bottom part of the esrog. We put the esrog and the lulav together. So how is it? Is esrog so much greater, the ultimate rishon, the ultimate hadar, or is it not? Based on what we're going to explain now, the different levels, we're going to connect them. So he says in line 12, this will be understood according to explanation of the Tzemach Tzedek, in what it explains that it will take for you in the first day. In the Sefer Migdash Melech, which is a Kabbalah Sefer, he explains that why is the say by the Esrog it shall take in the first day, because the Bina is called a Rishon. Because I believe because it precedes and it's the source of all the midas. And the Tzemach Tzedek says that even more we could say, Yom Harishon is going on Keser, like we mentioned earlier in the Maimer. This idea of the connection with Keser is a special connection with the Esrog. How come? The level of Kutsha B'richu, which usually goes on Zeir Ampin or on the 9 spheres, that's the level of Lulav. The Esrig, which Shchinte Ilah, the Shari al Yisrael. Esrig is the supernal Shechina that rests upon the Yin. So what is the Shchinte Ilah? Tzemach Tzedek explains sheyoysen near the Pirish Shchinte Ilah hainu loy bina ela malchus kishiateres bail. The level of the upper Shechina. Normally Shechina is associated with malchus, but here we're talking about Shchinte Ilah. So because we're talking about Shechinta Ilah, which is also sometimes associated with Ema Ilah, there's Ema Tata, the lower mother, and then there's the higher mother. The higher mother is Bina, Ema Bon Smecha, the mother, Bina is a mother to all the Midas. But the Shechinta Ilah, Tzemach Tzedek explains, makes more sense to say it's not Bina, Ela Malchus Kishiateres Baila. When Malchus becomes the crown of her husband, that she's even higher than Zah. Zah and Malchus are like husband and wife, but when Malchus is rooted higher, becomes the level of Keser, Ateres Baila, the crown of her husband, that's the level of Shechinta Ilah, that's the level of the Esrik. Al derech, similar to what it says, it says that Hashem's love for the Yidden was like a daughter, and even more so he called him my sister, and then he called my mother. And that says about the mother, the mother is the level of the Keser that is a mother and beyond the level of the Spheres of Atzilus. So there's the level the way it's a daughter, that's like Malchus is the lower level of Shekhinah, the way it's the last Sphere, and then there's the level of Malchus the way it becomes Knesset Yisrael, goes all the way up to Keser, Ateres Baila. Velakachtem can be Yom Rishon Priyetz Hadar. That's what it says you will take for you on the first day. This beautiful fruit, Ki Malchus Esrig Shechinta Ilah, because Malchus, which is the level of Esrig, the higher level of Shechinah, Mekabel Idea Bina Haaretz Hatika Kadisha Pnimis HaKeser BeYom Harishon. It receives via Bina. Bina is the means through which it receives that higher level. It receives the array of the inner level of Keser, which is the true level of Bayom Harishon. How come? Because the root of Malchus is from the level that's called the head that is not even able to be known. Opposed to the rest of the midas that are normally higher than Malchus, are rooted from Arich. Arich is the external part of the Keser, like it's explained in many places. So now we'll understand why the Esrig is at the bottom of the Lulav, and even, according to Kabbalah, could have even been beneath the Lulav. So he says in line 27, last paragraph on the page, according to this, we also understood the reason why the Esrig is called a Priyetz Hadar, still and all, despite being the highest, the Priyetz Hadar, from that everything else the Hadar is learned out. It's also taken last. We first pick up the lulav and begin the bracha, then we take the esrog at the end. Also, when we take all the four kinds, the location of the esrog is at the conclusion of the esrog and the kinds. Until there's an opinion of Kabbalah that has to be under the lulav and the other kinds. The Kibush Esrig with Shechinta Ilah Taba Peyutes, since Esrig is the higher level of Shechinah. Bechinas HaMalchus, the level of Malchus. Reis al derech ha'inyan deish chayil ateres Bible. It's similar to the idea of Eishes Chayil, the crown of her husband. V'hainu she'esrig hula matem ma'lulav mekabel amenom. B'dugmas Eishes Chayil shem gabel smot Bible. The Esrig is lower than the lulav and receives from it, similar to the Eishes Chayil that receives from her husband. Still know the primary idea of Hadar is by the Esrig. Since the Eishes Chayil is the crown of her husband because of its root in the head that's beyond being able to be known, the topmost level. You'll take on the first day this beautiful fruit. Also, the beginning of the Psukim, where it talks about the Yom Tov HaSukkos, where it says, in the 15th day of the 7th month, so already beginning the emphasis on the quality of Malchus. It's brought down Zohar, when the 15th day of the month arrives, Malchus now becomes full, because that's the level of the moon becomes full. It becomes illuminated from the supernal mother, from Bina, just like the moon gets its light from the sun. Though it begins with that, in the continuation of the Psukim and the mitzvah concerning the very mitzvah of the Dal Minim itself. Mitzvah Shabbat Torah Shekadma L'Olam, that we mentioned that it's a mitzvah and Torah preceded the world. Shazel in the Rishon Keniska Leil Siv Beis, that's why Torah is called a Rishon, like we mentioned earlier in Ice Beis. Nemar says, "Velakachtem lechem shall take for you B'yom Harishon Priyetz Hadar on the first day this beautiful fruit Shebzemud Geshes Miles HaMalchus Kvish Makabel Saidei Bina Har Satir Kadishka Nisrael." But this is emphasis to emphasize the quality of Malchus, the way it receives through Bina, the ray of the holy level of Atik, like we mentioned before. That we have to take all the four species. There matters in the world that already built in naturally it's recognized their unity. Until such a way the way it's visible in the Esrik. It's a higher way than with the Lulav and Hadasim and the Aravis, the unity in the Esrig, as we mentioned. God will from all the different changes of seasons that are opposites than each other, one fruit is grown, like we mentioned earlier. Through this we effect the true and complete redemption through our actions and service throughout the time of Golus, but especially through the beginning of the general avoid of the entire year. It comes after the avoid of Yom Kippur and the 10 days of Tshuva in general, and between and after the 4 days between Yom Kippur and Sukkot. And in those 4 days, all Yidden are involved in mitzvahs. This one is involved in building his sukkah. This one is involved in getting his lulav. This is the busyness and the preoccupation and preparation for the mitzvahs. Last page of the Maimer, and afterwards in the first day, it's the first day of calculation where Hashem starts finally making a business deal with us again. It begins the avoid of mitzvahs and taking for yourself the Priyetz Hadar. The mitzvah of Sukkah seems to have a precedence over the mitzvah of Lulav, because the mitzvah of Sukkah begins immediately as soon as the Yom Tov enters, as opposed to Lulav only begins in the morning. So he says, "Mikol Malkum still in all Madi Hashkasal Velakachtem can be a Marishan Priyetz Hadar." The pasuk says emphasis on the first day, on this very high, this new avodah that we're beginning. It's the first of the cheshbon of the avodah. We begin with the avodah of the Dal Minim. Shezoin Maseinu Seinu Barbas Minim. It's our actions and service in these 4 kinds. Though the way they were created already in a state of bittul and unity, affects in them, they should be a matter of a mitzvah. Until they're the highest most mitzvah. You shall take to you, it says about it, meaning it's only you alone and no foreigners with you. That's another idea of the lachem. Concerning this, it says in Medrash Rabbah, and the merit of taking for you in the first day. I will build for you the first, which is the Beis Hamikdash, the Chesiv by Kisei Kavod Maram Marishan, that the throne of glory exalted from first. I will bring for you first the Melech Mashiach. This is the King Mashiach. The Chesiv by Rishon Letzin Hine Hina Bukar Mamish. That it says by him this pasuk, the true and complete redemption in our speed of time.